So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alexa Toomey, and I head up the Sustainability, Renewable Energy and AgTech team here in Enterprise Ireland. I can see we're being joined by lots of colleagues, so if it's okay, we'll just wait a couple of minutes to allow people the time to join. Great. So I can see we've come over the 60 attendees mark. I know we had quite a high registration for today, so I'm sure more people will be joining as we go on. But in the interest of time, and I'm very conscious that everybody's given up their lunch hour to join us here today, I'll kick off. So just to introduce myself again, my name's Alexa Toomey. I head up the Sustainability, Renewable Energy and AgTech team here in Enterprise Ireland. I'd just like to welcome everybody to this, our second webinar in our Green Transition series. So last week we kicked off with a webinar looking at what does an SME climate journey look like. Today we're joined, and I'm delighted to say we're joined by colleagues from the SME Climate Hub, who are going to talk to us all about how SMEs can get started, tell us a little bit about the SME Climate Hub and how companies can engage with that platform, which enables SMEs to learn from each other, to learn from experts, and very importantly, to publicly make a pledge about what they're doing in terms of their own climate action. So I'd like to welcome Natalie and Pamela, who are both going to speak much more eloquently about the activities of the SME Climate Hub than I ever can. We're also joined by my colleague Kathleen O'Regan. Kathleen's a senior environmental advisor here in Enterprise Ireland, and I know many of you will know Kathleen and have possibly worked with Kathleen over the years. Kathleen's been working to help our client base to kind of start and accelerate their climate journey. So before I hand over to people who will be much more interesting than I am, I just want to say kind of a little bit about the webinar series and Enterprise Ireland's activities in this space. So as I mentioned, this is our second webinar. All of the webinars are recorded, and that's something I should have said at the outset. Today's webinar will be recorded and will be put up on our website. There will be a space for Q&A towards the end of today's webinar. The questions will come up in text, and Kathleen will be able to manage those. So the questions won't be kind of part of the recording, but the answers will. And really kind of the purpose of this whole webinar series is to reach out to our clients, to our stakeholders, to our colleagues, and raise awareness around the very broad range of initiatives, supports and activities that fall into the sustainability space that we're so very focused on. So today we're talking specifically around SMEs and what SMEs can do. We'll be talking about green finance next week. We'll be talking about ESG and B Corp. We'll be looking at the skills needs here. So there's a really wide range of activities in this space, and I think there is something that will apply to everybody. In Enterprise Ireland, sustainability is a key pillar of our own strategy, and we're working to support our clients to reduce their carbon footprint, to look at alternative options, but equally to address the wider sustainability space and to incorporate sustainability into their strategies. We think there's an awful lot of good reasons as to why companies should do this. Firstly, we all know it is the right thing to do. We all want to be responsible businesses and responsible citizens. But from a purely commercial point of view, we think that there's real competitive advantages to those companies who embrace sustainability into their business strategy, who bring sustainability into the core of what they're doing. At Enterprise Ireland, we're all about helping companies to compete in global markets. And we really think being able to talk about your green credentials, talk about your wider ESG strategy is going to really help our clients as they're competing overseas. So I'm going to hand you over to Kathleen now. You'll be in very good hands there. Kathleen will also be able to, if we have time, talk through some of the Enterprise Ireland offers that are available in this space, because we have a really wide range of supports that are all aimed at helping companies get started and equally accelerate their climate journey. So just to say thanks again for joining today, and I hope you enjoyed the webinar. I'll hand you over to Kathleen.
Thanks, Alexa, for that introduction. And look, we're absolutely delighted to have the SME Climate Hub here today. So we have Pamela Jovan and Natalie Shamwell. And Pamela is director of the SME Climate Hub and We Mean Business Coalition. And Pamela works with international partners, multinational companies and governments to accelerate the global movement and develop a one-stop shop platform, mobilizing small and medium-sized enterprises to take climate action on net zero. Pamela previously served as head of City Business Climate Alliances at C40, where she was responsible for expanding C40 service offering to member states relating to the acceleration of climate solutions with local and global businesses. Her experience also includes initiating and leading multi-partner programs focused on innovation and sustainability for Virgin Unite, the non-profit arm of the Virgin Group and University of the Arts London. Natalie is the Strategic Partnership Manager for the SME Climate Hub and the We Mean Business Coalition. In this role, she is responsible for developing and managing partnerships with non-profit, corporate, financial and government stakeholders, focused on mobilising and incentivising small and medium businesses to reduce emissions and take climate action on net zero. Previously, Natalie provided consulting services to multinational companies, helping them to develop and implement strategies and partnerships in support of corporate, social and environmental sustainability goals. She also designed strategies and implemented projects for the United States Agency for the International Development, focused on bringing government and corporate stakeholders together to collaborate on shared economic, environmental and social goals all over the world. So we're absolutely delighted to have you both here today. And look, I'll hand over to you both to continue on with your presentation. And if anyone has any questions at any time, please put them into the Q&A and we'll hopefully have time then at the end to address those. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, for these very thorough introductions. We're equally delighted to be here today to talk about the SME Climate Hub, which is a global initiative, as you'll hear from us in just a second. But we're also trying to work very closely with local stakeholders in select countries and geographies. And so we certainly hope that this presentation is going to help build our presence a little bit in Ireland, and looking forward to your questions, of course, at the end. So first things first, what is the Hub? The Hub is a digital platform that was launched about 3 years ago, and it was designed to act as a one-stop shop for SME climate action. In practice, this means that we do 3 different things for SMEs. And before I even mention these 3 things, just wanted to clarify that for us, SMEs are, of course, small and medium-sized enterprises, and we're using a very broad definition due to our global remit. For us, SMEs are businesses with fewer than 500 employees. But let's go back to what we do, the 3 pillars of our activities, really. If you have a look at the Hub, our website, you will see that we offer SMEs the opportunity to make a commitment, which is aligned with the 1.5-degree goal of the Paris Agreement, so basically aligned with the latest science. Incidentally, this commitment is also the official pathway for SMEs to join the United Nations Race to Zero campaign. So this is like the biggest campaign ever launched, backed by the United Nations, to really encourage non-state actor climate action. So it involves businesses, of course, but also regions, cities, and other stakeholders. The second thing that we do on the Hub is offer free best-in-class tools and resources for climate action that we've developed with some really high-level partners out there. These tools allow SMEs to measure their emissions, take action on them, but also report their progress. My colleague Natalie is going to walk you through some of these tools in just a few minutes. And the third thing that we do behind the scenes, in a way, it's not immediately visible on the platform, is work with a very wide range of partners, both at a global level and at a local level, to try and create a conducive ecosystem for SME climate action. This means that we work with multinational, for example, big corporates who want to engage SMEs in their supply chains. We also work with institutions, international institutions, to ensure that our commitment and our reporting tool, for example, are recognized as standards in this space. And we also work, obviously, with large networks of businesses, business associations, to make sure that we can promote our activities as much as possible. We currently have almost 7,000 SMEs who've made the commitment on the hub, quite a varied community as well. We have SMEs from over 120 countries, but many more are currently using our tools as well, and we're actively working on growing this community. Now, a little bit of background. So why was the hub launched as a platform? I'm sure that many of you will be aware of this, but I think it deserves a few words. So first of all, SMEs play a crucial role when it comes to climate action. It's really important to understand. They, of course, play a key role at community level. They're the backbones, really, of the economy in many countries, but they also play a crucial role as part of global supply chains. We also know that they have very specific needs. They're vulnerable when it comes to climate change. Many SMEs do not open after a disaster, so it's really in their interest to get ahead of the curve. And we also know that these small businesses face specific challenges. We run annual surveys to really understand the barriers and opportunities that SMEs face in our community. And you can see a snapshot of our latest survey results on this slide. And from what we can see and what we hear, small businesses tend to feel that they lack the skills and knowledge to take climate action. They also don't have the funds that sometimes are required. And also they think they don't have the time. Often SMEs are stretched between different priorities. In the current economic context that we're all aware of, is sometimes hard even just to survive for a small business. So taking that extra step to look at their emissions and act on them can sometimes feel a little bit daunting. So that's why we created the hub, to try and fill some of these gaps. And it's important to understand, once again, the business case behind climate action. And Alexa mentioned some of this very eloquently just a few minutes ago. So taking climate action is not only a good thing for the planet, it's also a good thing for business. The world we live in is changing, and changing fast. We can see that consumers are starting to, basically approach businesses that tend to have an interest in the planet. They're more interested in buying from these brands. Large corporations that have SMEs in their supply chains are changing their procurement processes. Many of them have set their own climate targets that also include their suppliers. So that's going to have an impact, of course, on SMEs who work with big buyers. Regulations are also changing. So basically, taking action is a way to navigate the expectations of all of these stakeholders that SMEs have to deal with on a daily basis, and to grow businesses. So as an SME, if you take action, you can grow your business and your brand. You can also improve efficiency across your business by, reducing your emissions, which sometimes means cutting down on, waste, for example, or packaging. All of this has a positive impact on your bottom line. And it's a way, basically, to gain a competitive advantage and manage your business risk. Now, if we look at what we do on the platform, we're going to start with the commitment, I believe, or even the user journey that we've designed for SMEs. So we know that there's a lot of information out there for small businesses, and that it's hard to understand where to start when you're an SME. So we designed a journey for SMEs to try and walk them through the basics of climate action. It starts by providing SMEs with key tools and resources that can help them understand where they stand. So we have, and again, my colleague Natalie is going to show you these tools in just a minute. We have tools on, emissions measurement, climate action education that can help SMEs understand what they're dealing with, where they're starting from. Once SMEs are a bit more comfortable with these concepts, we encourage them to make a public commitment, the one that I mentioned just a few seconds ago. It's a simple but very credible public commitment in line with science and the United Nations Race to Zero campaign. And once they make this commitment, we unlock additional resources for them. We create a profile on the website, but we also offer a number of comms and marketing benefits that I will mention in a couple of slides, I believe. And we're also actively working with a number of partners to make sure that SMEs who make the commitment can also benefit from additional incentives from large corporates, for example, or even banks who might be looking to work with SMEs that are a bit more ambitious when it comes to climate action. If we have a look at the commitment, similar to all our other tools, it's been simplified for SMEs. So it only has 3 different components. It's about halving greenhouse gas emissions before 2030, achieving net zero emissions by 2050, and disclosing progress on a yearly basis. And we've created a tool, of course, to help SMEs do that. And as I said before, SMEs who make the commitment on the SME Climate Hub are automatically counted as part of the United Nations Race to Zero campaign. Once you make the commitment, we, as an SME, we try and make sure that you can benefit from as many incentives as possible. So on the next slide, I believe that we have exactly some of the comms benefits that we try and offer SMEs. First of all, as a committed SMEs, you have access to a badge. You can download a badge from the website to use on your website, social media channels, really to communicate about your commitment, engagement. But we also run communication campaigns throughout the year, and we invite SMEs from our community to join. So we create assets, resources that they can use on their own materials, channels, communication strategies. We also regularly join events at key summits that sometimes offer speaking opportunities to SMEs. So once again, this is something that we try and share with our community. And of course, there's all the benefits that come with being part of the United Nations Race to Zero campaign. So once again, it's a way for SMEs to stand out from the rest a little bit, and we try and really leverage all the comms and marketing opportunities that we have as an initiative to also involve our community. And we publish case studies also along the way, of course. I think that might be time for me exactly to hand this over to Natalie so she can walk you through the tools that we offer on the platform. Natalie, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Pamela. So as Pamela mentioned, we recognize that something that SMEs see as a barrier to taking climate action is the knowledge and skills needed to kind of know what to do and how to take action and what is needed from them as a business. And so we have developed and continue to develop new tools and resources that, as a reminder, are totally free and available on our platform to any SME or any business that's interested. So this gives you a high-level overview of the number of tools that we have on the platform, and I'll deep dive into a couple of them in just a minute. But just as an overview, we have Climate Fit, which is our education training course. We have our business carbon calculator, which is an automated calculator that SMEs can use to measure emissions and identify emissions hotspots. We have our financial support guide, which is an explainer and an overview of the types of financial support that SMEs can access and where they can access that finance and how to kind of communicate their interest in accessing finance for climate action. We have a library of external tools that's curated by the Net Zero team at Oxford University. So that's a library of external free tools in support of business climate action. We have our reporting tool, which was launched earlier this year, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But we also recognize that there's an interest from SMEs in really practical step-by-step guides on the different types of actions that they can take to reduce emissions within their business operations. And so we're in the process of developing what we're calling action modules that will walk very practical kind of checklists and step-by-step guides that will walk SMEs through different actions they can take. And we're also working collaboratively with a number of partners to also develop sector-specific tools and resources. So that's something that we've heard from our SME community, is that they really want tools and resources tailored to their specific situation, whether it's their sector or their country. And so we're working with a number of partners to deliver kind of additional tailored tools for SMEs that will be available on the SME Climate Hub website. So I'm going to dive in a little bit more deeply to a couple of our tools. So our business carbon calculator, we developed in collaboration with Normative and a team of fellows from google.org. It's an automated calculator. SMEs can sign up to use the calculator, and you basically submit information about your business. You include spend data from kind of your accounting, like how much do you spend on electricity, how many vehicles do you have within a fleet, and it automatically calculates scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, and will also help you identify hotspots. So where are the key areas that you might be able to take action as a small business to reduce your emissions? And the engine is all based on the greenhouse gas protocol methodology. So it's based on kind of that international standard for emissions calculation. So that's a really exciting tool, and a tool that's of great interest to a lot of the SMEs that are committed on the platform. We also have Climate Fit, which is our interactive training course. It's a 7-part training on our website. It's really what we call our Climate Action 101. So it's a really great foundational resource for kind of foundational understanding of climate, what it means for your business. And as you can see here, the 7 modules, it goes from kind of strategy and governance to taking action within your operations, your supply chain, your kind of product or service design, all the way through to kind of communications and storytelling. So it's a really great foundational course. It's interactive. There are videos and checklists and case studies, and it's a really kind of interesting course for SMEs to take that are really kind of at the beginning of their climate journey. As I mentioned, we have our financial support guide, which outlines, different ways that small businesses can access finance from different institutions, whether it's private finance or grant offerings. And so we are kind of in the process of as Pamela mentioned, engaging with a number of different partners to create new kind of financial incentives, but this is a great overview guide of where you can go today to access financing for any kind of climate action that you're looking to take. Then we have our reporting tool. So as I mentioned, this is a relatively new tool that we launched this year. We're really excited about. It's based on a simplified SME disclosure framework, which we developed in collaboration with CDP in the lead up to COP26 in the UK. And so the reporting tool is based on that framework for SMEs. And it's a tool where you're able to submit and report on your annual emissions, on the climate actions that you've taken, on the impact of the emissions reduction on your kind of overall emissions. And this is, as we mentioned, as part of the commitment, it is required to kind of disclose on an annual basis. So this is a free reporting tool that any SME can use to disclose their progress on our platform. They can use it they can use it on their website, they can use it with other kind of customers or clients or stakeholders. But it's a really great kind of simplified tool for SMEs to be able to kind of disclose progress and disclose updates on their emissions. And, once an SME completes the report and submits kind of that annual disclosure, it gets published on our website in conjunction with your business profile on the SME Climate Hub platform. So it's a really exciting tool. We hope it'll be really helpful for SMEs in being able to report their progress and report their emissions to their customers, their consumers, financial institutions. And as Pamela said, we're working to make sure that this is a recognized format for reporting and for SMEs to report on progress. So that's a little bit about our tools. So I'm just going to quickly talk through kind of who we work with and some of the partnerships that we have as part of the SME Climate Hub. So as Pamela mentioned earlier, we are really doing a lot of work behind the scenes to engage with stakeholders and partners in the background to really create a conducive ecosystem for SMEs to be able to take climate action, reduce their emissions, and work towards net zero. And so we do a lot of work with lots of different stakeholders to be able to kind of create this ecosystem. So we work with strategic partners and funders who help us create new content for the website, develop new tools and resources, and kind of generally support the development of the SME Climate Hub. As Pamela mentioned, we work with a number of institutional partners. We work, with government stakeholders, bilateral and policy organizations, and climate standard setters to really collaborate and align to promote the SME Climate Hub as the standard for SME climate action. There's a lot of information out there in terms of standard setting and targets and reporting, and we really want to kind of simplify that process for SMEs, and so really are working within these different institutions to get the SME Climate Hub's standard and commitment and reporting recognized by a number of these different actors. We also work with a number of kind of networks and NGOs to be able to reach SMEs with information about the SME Climate Hub. They may also be providing kind of technical assistance and support to SMEs in taking this climate action. We recognize that that's of interest to SMEs as well. So working with a number of nonprofit NGOs to promote the SME Climate Hub throughout their networks. We also work with large corporates who have small businesses within their value chain or within their supply chain, working with them to encourage their value chain SMEs to make the commitment to take climate action, to report annually. And we're also working with a number of these actors to create incentives to support and encourage small businesses to take climate action and create business incentives, real business incentives to be able to kind of move SMEs forward in taking that action. So that's really the broad ecosystem of partners that we work with. We also are working in a number of geographies. So we are a global initiative. Any SME anywhere in the world can use the tools on the hub, make the commitment, report through the SME Climate Hub. But we recognize that there's an interest from SMEs in also receiving kind of specific country or regional level support or information. And we recognize that the context is very different from country to country for SMEs. And so we are working in some geographies at a country level. So we worked with the UK government in the lead up to COP26 to run a campaign encouraging SMEs to make the climate commitment and sign up to the SME Climate Hub. We recently launched kind of a sister platform in collaboration with the UK government and an organization called the Broadway Initiative, called the UK Business Climate Hub, which is a website that leads directly to the SME Climate Hub's global platform, but also requires or provides UK specific content for SMEs in the UK. Our SME Climate Hub is currently available in English and in Spanish. So we also launched in Spain a couple of years ago and have been running kind of workshops to understand the needs of SMEs in Spain and how we might tailor support and tools for those SMEs in Spain. Last year at Climate Week New York, we launched in the US. We've been running a number of campaigns in collaboration with an NGO called America is All In, to try and reach SMEs in the US with this information and encourage them to make the commitment, take climate action, and kind of reduce their emissions towards net zero. In India, we're running a number of workshops and pilots in industry clusters in India. So working and providing capacity building support to SMEs in specific industry clusters. We've also been working quite closely with the Center for Responsible Business on these activities. And we just last week launched, or 2 weeks ago, launched our India landing page, which again will provide kind of India-specific content for SMEs in India, but will also kind of, again, link back to our global platform and the commitment and the tools and resources available on the SME Climate Hub platform. We are running pilots with the Inter-American Development Bank in Latin America, working with large corporates in the region to engage SMEs in their supply chains and build the capacity of the SMEs in their supply chains. And we're working with IDB in a number of countries in the region to do that. And then another kind of initiative, just to mention briefly, is that we are working closely with the COP28 unit in the lead up to COP28 to run a campaign in the Middle East and North Africa. With COP28 being in the UAE this year, we want to make sure that we're kind of encouraging and engaging SMEs in the region to take climate action and make the commitment through the SME Climate Hub. So we'll be translating the website into Arabic as well for that initiative, and hope to kind of mobilize a number of SMEs within the MENA region to make the commitment and take climate action through the SME Climate Hub. So I think that's all we have in terms of slides, Kathleen. I'm not sure if there are any questions, but we're happy to take questions.
Yeah, look, thanks very much. Look, that was really, good overview, and I'm sure it's food for thought now for a lot of people, and hopefully they'll all be logging onto the SME Climate Hub to check it out. We just have one question there in the inbox at the moment. So if anyone else has any questions, now is your time to put them in. I have one or two questions myself, I suppose, in terms of, for the mixed audience here today, and just so the terminology that's used, I suppose, can be hard for people to understand in terms of, say, whether it's net zero or carbon neutral. What does net zero mean, and what would be your understanding, I suppose, perhaps of net zero?
Natalie, you want to take this one?
Sure. So when we talk about net zero, we're really talking about reducing carbon emissions within related to your business. And so this is defined kind of in 3 different scopes. So scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. And by being net zero, you're reducing those emissions to 0. So this could be anything from how your product is manufactured. So in your supply chain, your product or your service, or any kind of item that you're purchasing as part of your supply chain to provide your service or your product. For scope 2, it could be business travel. So if you're traveling to conferences or meetings, you're flying to different locations, those could be emissions that would count towards your scope 2. And then you have scope 1, which is kind of your kind of energy use. So what kind of energy are you using, whether it's kind of fossil fuel based or if it's renewable, talking about energy efficiency too. So are you unplugging your computer at the end of the day when you walk out of the office? So the net zero really means kind of reducing your carbon emissions down to 0 in those 3 different scopes. I don't know, Pamela, if you want to add to that as well.
Yeah, no, thank you, Natalie. So absolutely accurate. This is the reason why we use the term net zero instead of 0. So the utmost priority, of course, is to reduce your emissions as much as possible, but we do recognize that there are some emissions that cannot be avoided sometimes as part of your operations. And that's why, as a rule of thumb, we usually consider that emissions should be reduced by 90% by 2050. And then the remaining 10% you can compensate by buying carbon offsets. So it's a complementary approach. It cannot replace carbon reductions, but there is this opportunity, of course, also to be even more active by looking at carbon credits. Helpful to mention too, so a couple of things would be helpful to mention, I guess. So first of all, we do recognize that scope 3 emissions are a huge challenge for any business, so even large businesses, and even more so, of course, SMEs. So we're taking a gradual approach when it comes to scope 3 emissions, which, as Natalie said, are basically supply chain emissions, which means that we expect you, so when you make the commitment and start using the hub, we'll expect you to start looking at your scope 1 and 2 emissions, of course, and then your business travel and your material scope 3 emissions as much as possible. So that's what we have in mind for the first pillar of the commitment, which is about halving your emissions by 2030. But we're not expecting, for example, SMEs to immediately report on their scope 3 emissions. If you look at our reporting tool, you'll see that the section about scope 3 emissions is still optional at the moment. So we encourage you to do as much as possible to start looking at scope 3 emissions, because that's often where the bulk of your emissions will lie. But we do recognize that there are added challenges. And so we're always, of course, gathering feedback also from our community of SMEs to see how we can, better support them to address those. So that was the first point. And the second point is that we also recognize that very small businesses and startups are also often growing fast, right? And so there's a bit of a contradiction there. When you're a fast growing company, well, how can you halve your emissions? So we've created a specific rule for very small companies, so companies with fewer than 50 employees, and also SMEs and startups that are basically creating or acting as green solution providers. So basically offering green services and products. For these two categories of businesses, there's a possibility of applying a carbon intensity rule. So instead of halving your absolute emissions by 2030, you're asked to halve your carbon intensity by 2030, which we hope is going to make things a bit easier again for these fast growing companies. And I'm posting in the chat box, I'm actually posting the link to our Q&A document, fact document on the website that provides additional details on what the commitment means, and again, the definition of net zero, especially in an SME Climate Hub context.
Brilliant. No, look, that's really clear and really helpful. And look, we'll share that as well in an email following up from today's webinar with the recording. And just kind of following on from that, if a company was to commit, how long typically then to actually publishing your report from that initial commitment?
Shall I keep talking, Natalie, or do you want to take this?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so once again, we're trying to remove as many barriers as possible for SMEs, right? So if you look at our website, you'll see that the commitment form is actually really, really simple. You only need to provide contact details, some basic information on your business, select your target, because you can commit to net zero by 2050, but you can also select an earlier date if you really want to be very ambitious. So you just need to fill that in, and then we validate your commitment in a matter of days. We obviously need to make sure that you're an actual, legal entity company that exists. So we receive a lot of requests, so usually it takes a few days, but after that, you're counted as part of our community and as part of the UN Race to Zero. After that, SMEs are expected to report within a year. So we do recognize that it takes a bit of time for SMEs to familiarize themselves with the tools that we have, the context, the resources, start making plans internally. And so we expect them to report after a year. Right now, we're running our first reporting cycle for SMEs who are already in our community. We launched our reporting tool a few months ago. So there's a large part of our community that is now expected to submit reports by October. But once again, we're here to support SMEs. So we're also gathering feedback in the process. We've set up some extension options for SMEs who might need additional support. So we're basically trialing this tool with our community of SMEs to see how well it works for them. But generally speaking, the idea is for SMEs to report on an annual basis. So starting from 1 year after they make the commitment.
That's great. No, look, thanks for that. So I'll just go through some of the questions that have been coming through there and the Q&A. And the first one, I suppose, is in relation to finance. So I suppose, look, just to point out there that we do have a webinar on it's on the 20th of September, Wednesday, 20th of September, on green finance. And we'll have the Strategic Banking Corporation of Ireland, SBCI, talking about their new sustainability, growth and sustainability fund, and also a new energy efficiency loan scheme. And we'll have Bank of Ireland on that webinar as well. So I'm not sure, is there anything that either of you, Pamela or Natalie, want to add in relation to the finance part of it?
Sure, I can maybe add some thoughts kind of from the SME Climate Hub side. So obviously we have the financial support guide, which provides a really great overview of where SMEs can access finance and the different kind of stakeholders that they can engage to gain access to finance. We're always looking at new tools that we can develop and provide on the platform. So we're looking into developing new tools around risk that might relate to kind of accessing finance for your business. But then as we talked about, we're also in discussions with a number of financial stakeholders, whether it's banks or funds, to make sure that, one, they're recognizing the SME climate commitment as a standard for them as they look at providing financing in alignment with net zero and climate rules and regulations. And so we are working with them to have the commitment and the reporting recognized, so they can use that as part of their due diligence or their review process. But we're also collaborating with a number of organizations at the moment to pilot different activities in which a bank or a financial institution would link either a discount on a loan or preferential loan terms, or they provide access to green financing to those SMEs that have made the commitment and are reporting through the hub. So we're continuing to work in the background to try and create those financial incentives that are linked to making the commitment and reporting through the hub. But we recognize that this is a huge need for SMEs, is the need for kind of resourcing and financing. So we're doing a lot of work to try and make those connections.
That's great. Look, thanks for that. So next question, is there any platform we can use to track emissions on a daily basis? Well, just to point out, I suppose, that on the directory of green service providers, which you'll find on the Enterprise Ireland website, we do have a list of different platform providers, and this list is growing all the time as new platforms are developed. So the platforms can be around emissions, or they can be, for monitoring your electricity, your fuel, your water, your steam usage, or it can be around employee engagement, in terms of, or around ESG, just as an example. So perhaps check that out. Natalie or Yvonne, is there anything that you'd like to, or Pamela, is there anything you'd like to add there?
So I think that, we've given an overview already of the tools that we have on the platform. It's an ever-evolving website, so we keep adding resources, of course. In terms of tracking emissions on a daily basis, I'd be very interested to see which tools and platforms you highlight on your own website, Kathleen.
Yeah.
Because we're a nonprofit, we're not in a position to endorse specific service providers, so for-profit companies. So this is not information that at the moment we can add to the website, but there's obviously a lot happening out there. So I would definitely encourage to look at the Enterprise Ireland website. And going forward, we might be able to offer more tools in this regard on the hub as well.
Yeah, and I think tools are, currently being developed as we speak, because this is really a growing area, obviously. But yeah, it's really to do your homework and, figure out which tool, works best for you. Is there a cost? I don't think so, in terms of signing up to Climate Hub. That's great.
Yeah, that's
yeah. Is net zero a harder sell to services businesses that aren't producing a physical product? And is it harder to identify carbon savings?
So the short answer is not really. On the contrary, service businesses might actually find it easier to look at their emissions hotspots and understanding, how they can cut them. Obviously, things vary on a case-by-case basis. It depends what your service is doing, the type of premises that you're using, the service providers. It's a difficult question to answer without knowing exactly what your business, what your company's core business is. But we have SMEs from pretty much any sector who join the hub. So it really depends on how you're approaching things internally. I definitely wouldn't say that it's a harder sell. On the contrary, we have many SMEs that come from the consulting, IT sector, so that's a large part of our community.
And we see that as well, I suppose, in terms of companies that are availing of Enterprise Ireland green supports. It is across all sectors and all sizes, from professional services companies to manufacturing. So out of the 7,000 members, how many, and you mightn't have these exact numbers, but I suppose roughly, are micro in size, or at least less than 50 employees, or the majority larger? So kind of in terms of your client companies, are they, what size are most of them, or the majority?
Yeah, so we don't have the latest stats at hand, but it's the vast majority. We were actually saying this just before the webinar. It's really the vast majority. I would say probably around 70, 80%. Once again, please don't quote me on this. Unfortunately, the recording is going to be on your website. Maybe I shouldn't have said it, but we can provide these stats after the webinar. But we do recognize that the hub is particularly helpful for smaller businesses who are completely new to this, don't have much time and resources to dedicate to climate action, and so are looking for a platform that can provide automated support, very user-friendly tools as well to start on their net zero journey.
That's great. So the Scope 3 calculation on the SME Climate Hub website is based on expenditure amounts, not activity. Does this adhere to the GHG protocol standard?
Yeah, Natalie, you were talking about the tools. You want to take this one?
Sure. So the engine is based on the greenhouse gas protocol, but as you said, the scope 3 is based on spend. So it's an estimation, right, of your scope 3, but that's a lot of how a lot of people at this point are able to calculate their scope 3 is an estimate based on spend. And so it does align with kind of the methodologies of the protocol and kind of what even larger businesses are doing as well. But it is, as you said, it's an estimate of the scope 3 emissions based on your spend.
And maybe just one quick thing on the calculator, it also uses country and sector factors. So it's a global tool, but it also looks at the specificities of your business to the extent that it is possible. It was also optimized. Can't remember whether you said that during the presentation, Natalie, but it was optimized for smaller businesses. So our main goal was to make it as user-friendly as possible, as simple as possible. So we tried to make it, very simple with the quick questions about the business and then the spend data section, which works very well for businesses who, for example, operate in a single country. Then, of course, as businesses get bigger, start having more complex operations, they might also benefit from using more sophisticated calculators. But it's going to be very hard to find an automated calculator completely free of charge that can provide that level of accuracy, of course.
Do you have any benchmarks for various industries to date in terms of their emissions?
We do have that, as a matter of fact. And again, this is something that our partners at Normative are providing. We can add a tool, a link to that specific tool, and it's also available on the final dashboard that you're provided with when you use the calculator. So it's a benchmarking tool, again, to understand how your business compares to similar companies in the same sector and the same country. While we go through the other questions, I'll see if I can dig out that link very quickly.
That's great.
I would also add that, as we mentioned, we're just starting to collect reporting data directly from our SMEs. And so, once we were able to go through that exercise a few times, we'll be able to kind of aggregate that data and probably be able to share it kind of on a sector by sector basis. So that is something that we want to do as part of the hub, as well as be able to show you as an SME how you compare to at least those other SMEs that have made the commitment through the platform.
Great. And this, I think, is our final question. I suppose, look, one of the biggest issues, and I think we probably could all agree with this, with reporting on sustainability, is the amount of data, that's needed. So do you have any recommendations for data collection?
Well, as Natalie said, our own reporting tool is based on a simplified disclosure framework for SMEs that we co-developed with CDP. So we're already trying to make things as simple as possible for smaller businesses. Tools like the business carbon calculator on the hub might help you come up with some of these estimates. We know that it's difficult. In the reporting tool, once again, there are some compulsory fields, but some others are optional, so as to give SMEs the time, again, to collect the data, understand how they can go about doing this. A lot can be done just by looking at your spend data, as we were saying, or even just your bills, invoices. We're going to try and publish even more guidance on this. We have a few action models in the pipeline that will also talk about emissions reporting and measurement. So please, keep watching the space. But yes, I think the best thing is just to get started, look at the information that you have already and how it aligns with the requirements of, for example, our reporting tool, which is already simplified.
And it depends then exactly what reporting tool you're using, what data you're collecting, the size of your company and all of that. But I suppose, keep in mind then some of the supports that are available in terms of consultancy supports to help you with that, in terms of, collecting data, understanding and setting your KPIs and targets, and then perhaps what software platform could help you to do that in terms of data collection. So there's one final comment then in relation to collecting data for staff travel. Does this need to be done every month or say, or is it per year? In terms of, it's a lot of work in collecting the data. So, the more data you have, the more granular it is, the better it is, obviously. So it depends on what your expected outcome is. But if you're looking at staff travel, then yeah, you'd be looking at the numbers there. So look, thanks very much, and it was great, to have all the questions coming in there, and I'm sure it's of interest to everyone, I suppose, here attending today in terms of the different questions that come up. Hopefully, the answers will be applicable to everyone. I'm just going to share my slide now, just to show you, I suppose, the other webinars that we have coming up. That hopefully will be of interest, including the green finance and one which I mentioned. So I'm just going to.
And just one quick point for me, Catherine, if you don't mind. So I just shared 2 links in the chat box, including a link to the benchmarking tool that we were talking about, but I realized that I cannot make this visible for all participants. So, I'll trust you'll be able to share this after the webinar.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I'll share that afterwards. Yeah, no, look, thanks a million for that, Pamela. So look, so I'm just sharing a slide here with our other webinars in this lunchtime series. So last week we had one on what does a climate action journey look like. That recording is available I've given a link there to the Global Ambition Climate Solutions Events webpage. So the recording is available, and the recording of today's will be available later on this afternoon. Next week we do have a webinar on green financing, where we will hear from both Bank of Ireland and SBCI on new loans and schemes that are becoming available. We will then hear from B Corp, and we'll hear from 2 companies, I suppose, that have gone through the B Corp certification, Urban Vote and Strong Roots. And we'll hear from James McManus, who's the B Corp ambassador in Ireland. So we have a range of other webinars. Sustainability reporting and ESG, I think, will be fairly relevant to everyone. Policy, regulatory and business focus on net zero emissions, and in particular the new Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. And then in October, we have a webinar on green skills, and finally then one on the green economy. So make sure you register for those, and if you can't attend, the recording will be shared afterwards. So this just final slide just shows you the supports that are available, I suppose, from Enterprise Ireland, and I've included supports here from SAI as well, because they'll be relevant to many attending here today. But for companies that are starting out on their journey, we would recommend that they download the Climate Toolkit for Business. This will give you an estimate of your organizational carbon footprint, and it will give you an initial action plan. And it will also help you understand what the funding landscape is like, because it can be hard for companies to know where to go for support, whether it's Enterprise Ireland, whether it's SAI. And I appreciate we might have a mixed audience here today. So if you're not a client of Enterprise Ireland and you're a client of the local enterprise office, or IDA, make sure you reach out to your relevant agent advisor. The next step then would be, if you haven't carried out an energy audit recently, or you haven't carried out one at all, is to avail of the SAI €2,000 voucher to do an energy audit. Now, this is available to companies that have an energy spend of greater than €10,000 per annum. And SAI also on their website have a free online training energy academy, and they've guides to energy efficiency and management. So it'd definitely be worth checking that out. And the next step we're advising companies is to, look at the Enterprise Ireland supports under the Climate Planning Fund for Business. There's a range of supports there, from a climate action voucher to a green plus. Now, you don't have to start as a climate action voucher. It depends on where you are on your journey. But the climate action voucher is a 2-day fully funded support to help develop an initial action plan that can be broad in terms of sustainability, or can be narrow focused in terms of decarbonisation, or it can be around the circular economy. So to identify an opportunity to become more circular and reduce waste. Green Start is a 7-day, 80% funded support to get a consultant in for 7 days to help introduce best practice. And this can be around implementing an environmental management system, developing your carbon reduction roadmap, how to carry out a life cycle assessment, how to calculate your carbon footprint of your organisation or of your product. We have a range We do have a directory of green service providers on our website that we maintain. There's a range of expertise on that, from developing a biodiversity action plan to water stewardship. Now, you don't have to select somebody from the directory. The directory is just to show you the expertise that is out there, or could be aligning to the science-based targets, for example. Strategic consultancy, specifically for large or complex energy users, to develop a carbon reduction roadmap. And Green Plus is a training grant to really embed environmental management capabilities. And the expectation here is that companies will align to international standards. So that could be the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, it could be ISO 14001, or the science-based targets. And the next step for companies then really is about investing, and that could first of all be in meters to really understand your resource use better, to become more resource efficient, whether that be with your energy or your water or your steam. So it's a 50% grant to install meters. We then have a capital investment grant for decarbonisation processes, and this is to decarbonise manufacturing heating processes. So if you're using heat in your manufacturing, you could potentially move away from fossil fuel to heat pumping. There might be waste heat there that you could install, heat recovery and use that heat. Use. And we also have environmental aid, which is a large capital support for transformative investment opportunities to reduce resource use, whether that be energy or other resources, water, and to become more circular. And it's to keep in mind SAI support. So they have a range of capital supports under the community scheme, under their Exceed scheme. They have solar support under Microgen, and there's electric vehicle support there as well. But to truly transform, and develop a sustainable product, service, or business model, this will require RD&I, and Enterprise Ireland and other agencies have a range of RD&I supports, from an innovation voucher, innovation partnership, to agile innovation, exploring innovation in R&D. And then it's to keep in mind that you will need to collaborate with other stakeholders. No one company will be able to do this alone, and there's a lot of clusters, technology centres, and a lot of European funding available for businesses to develop more sustainable product, processes, or services. Finally, I'd just like to say thank you for attending today, and I'd like to thank our, both the SME Climate Hub and Natalie and Pamela for your really insightful and comprehensive, presentation today. And look, for more information, obviously go to SME Climate Hub, but check out the Enterprise Ireland website in terms of Global Ambition Green Transition Fund. Contact your development advisor or your agency advisor, or email green@enterprise-ireland.com. And we'll be delighted to talk to you more on this. So look, thanks very much for everyone for attending today.
Thanks so much. Have a nice rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.